boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Caderna Podcast, and I'm your host, Brian Caderna. So we're happy to have you back here just to give you a very quick update on how the show is doing. We're off to a great start here, and we're officially live on pretty much every mode of communication for the podcasting world. You could check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Play for the Android people, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn. Pretty much any of the major podcast hosts, you'll be able to find the Caderna Podcast there. So along those lines, please do subscribe to the show so you don't miss any episodes. Give us a review, hopefully a 5-star review. Leave us a note. Definitely share it with your friends. Let everybody know about the Caderna Podcast. Knowledge is power. The more of this financial and this business advice we can get out there, I think the better off everyone's going to be. And along those lines, just to kind of consolidate all the communication we've had, and in particular suggestions for future shows, we have a new email address that we'll be using. It's the cadernapodcast@gmail.com. So just the show title, the Caderna Podcast@gmail.com. And you want to keep that handy, not only for throwing us questions or suggestions, but also now what we're going to do, many of you are probably aware, every Sunday night we've been raffling off a $10 Amazon gift card just to a random fan of the Facebook page. Now we're going to add a new wrinkle since the show's really getting up and running, and we'll have a trivia question built into every episode. And if you can answer the trivia question, send over your answer to the cadernapodcast@gmail.com. And now each Sunday night we'll randomly select one of those correct answers to receive the $10 Amazon gift card. So be sure to listen to the whole episode. You don't want to miss that question. And again, send it right over to the cadernapodcast@gmail.com. And maybe Sunday night you'll be the winner. So what are we going to talk about today? What's today's topic? If you didn't gather by the show title or the episode title, I was asked a few weeks ago by a pretty prominent financial publication I'm sure we all know. And they asked, hey, Brian, can you write us an article, an article on is $1 million still enough to last for all of retirement? And that really got me thinking. I'm doing a lot of research and kind of questioning that myself. And I said, instead of writing all about this, why don't I talk about it and fold that into our podcast? And so here we are. Is $1 million enough for retirement? Will it last? And you very well may be one of the 10,000 baby boomers that's retiring every day now, saying, hey, I have what I have. Is this enough to retire? Can I move on to that next phase of my life? What's going to happen? Or conversely, you might be a millennial on the kind of the beginning side of your career, just really getting settled in and saying, hey, how much do I need to know before I can, quote unquote, cash out? I got other passions, other things I want to do at some point. What exactly does it take in today's day and age to retire? All right. And along those lines, why I think this is such a popular question and why I really fell in love with the topic is it's just human nature that we're all searching for patterns. We always want to find a pattern throughout any aspect of life. It's just, again, that human nature, that craving for pattern recognition. And we want to be able to say, hey, if we do X, Y is the result. If we can get to this point, this goal, then this is the outcome that we should anticipate. All right? None of us really enjoy surprises or just getting utterly blindsided in life. I don't know anyone that would kind of say, okay, I know what one outcome is going to be versus an uncertainty. You know what? Let me take the uncertain one. That's just not really the way that we're wired. That's not, we're creatures of habit. We like to, again, see these recurring patterns. And so we want to think, if we hit a magic number, whatever our number is, that we'll be assured a certain outcome that we can enjoy in retirement. And that, of course, begs that question, how much, when, can we do it? Is this accumulation phase that we've been working towards our entire career and funding and putting money away? Is this now ready to be turned over into a decumulation phase? All right. So just as so many of my clients ask me every day, again, being their financial advisor, where they come in, they lay out their entire financial scenario, and then they say, hey, Bri, are we good? Is this going to get the job done? Are we good to go? So we're going to take a look at that. And again, the basis of it will be that famous $1 million figure that we'll work off of. Okay.
$1 million.
That's the reason why I really picked it, Dr. Evil. So not to steal my own thunder, but again, the question, is $1 million enough? The answer, I'll give it away right at the outset. I don't know. I honestly have no clue if $1 million is enough. And I'm going to tell you why. We're at the beginning of August 2019. All right. Huge football fan here. If you ask me, hey, Bri, who's going to win the Super Bowl this year? My knee jerk reaction, I'm just going to tell you the Dallas Cowboys, like I do every single year, diehard fan. But in reality, we got a whole preseason ahead of us. We got 16 games. We got the playoffs. Then we got the Super Bowl. There's a million things that could happen between then and now and then. All right. So nobody, not even an odds maker in Vegas, is going to tell you, hey, these guys are going to win the Super Bowl. We just don't know. And that's why they play the game. Okay. So if that's just one season of football, how can we possibly say over a 10, 20, 30-year time horizon whether a certain game plan is going to be adequate enough for your retirement? Okay, now we can certainly look and just like we would a ESPN anchor, if you will, and analyze a football team and say, you know what, they have a certain probability of success, and we can associate, a certain margin of error and make that guesstimate. All right, we can do something similar with retirement based on, how you've planned so far, but there's no guarantee there. Okay, there's no amount of stochastic analysis that's going to prove something. That's near impossible. Okay, or it is impossible, matter of fact. So you're going to reach that point in time, or you may already be there, and ask yourself, did we save too much or did we not save enough? And just again, to look at kind of a frame of reference, we're going to use that $1 million number and really analyze and say, is $1 million enough to last for retirement? So again, I'm the history guy. I always like to kind of take it back to, history and learn a little bit from the past. So $1 million, that's always had such an aura about it. To some you hear a million and it's, wow, this enormous fortune. I wish someday I could get there. I'd be a millionaire. Then I'd have nothing to worry about. And you just as easily could go speak to someone that says, $1 million, man, that ain't what it used to be. What are you gonna do with $1 million? That's never gonna work. That's just not what it used to be. That's not the life of luxury anymore. And along those lines, if we go all the way back to 1913, all right, to kind of start our analysis, 1913, when federal income tax was permanently enacted, if you had $1 million in 1913, that would be the equivalent today of $25.8 million in 2019. That's a real figure. Accounting for inflation, $1 million in 1913, that's like having 25.8 million today. Okay, so I think if you had $1 million back then, you could probably say that that's going to last. One would hope. We fast forward 1945, another big year. This was the end of World War II. If you had $1 million back then, that's equal to about $14.2 million today. Not too shabby. We go further to 1981. Okay, this was when the first millennial was born. In 1981, kind of started this generation everyone's obsessed with talking about in the news. $1 million back then, it'd be like $2.8 million today. Still pretty good, I think most would say. But you're getting the idea here is that $1 million is lessening in value over time. And that's what's going to introduce our first wealth eroding factor, being inflation, often termed the silent killer in the financial world. Okay, so now if we apply that to current day, and you say, well, what's that do to that $1 million baseline we're working off of? Let's assume that you're 65 years old, all right, just kind of an average retirement age, and you want to peg, a 20-year time horizon for retirement. So hang it up at 65, we're going to live till 85. We got 20 years to live on $1 million. Assuming a 3% inflation rate, $1 million 20 years from today, when we're 85, is going to be equal to about $744,000. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind with your own hypothetical $1 million here. So inflation, that's one wealth eroding factor. We're going to get to more in just a minute, but let's go back to our question here. Let's not get too sidetracked, which I have a tendency to do. How long is $1 million going to last? Well, let's look at it, in the easiest kind of do-it-yourself solution and translate $1 million into a spendable asset. Okay, so the easiest math here is going to be take the $1 million. We got, let's assume again, a 20-year retirement horizon, and we'll just do what we call a linear pay down of $1 million. So it's $1 million sitting under the mattress. We're going to spend it equally over a 20-year period. That equals $50,000 of income that we'll be able to live off of in retirement. All right, again, we're not including any other influencing factors. This is just spending down that $1 million. Now, your next question might be, okay, well, you're the finance guy. I mean, how many of your clients just leave $1 million under the mattress? Of course, the answer is none. People want to get their money working for them. That's what we say wealth is. The difference between rich and wealthy. Rich work hard, make a lot of money. Wealthy work hard, their money makes a lot of money. That's what you're aiming for. Okay, so I get that. So let's assume that now we invested that $1 million. Again, we'll get a hypothetical 4% return. All right. And now you're totally going to the other side, saying, I want to do what's called an interest-only approach. I don't want to spend down the whole million. So 4% off of $1 million, interest-only, you're going to have a $40,000 annual income, okay? And we preserve that $1 million. And then your next question, or at least what I hear from a lot of folks out there is, well, you told me a linear spend down, then you told me interest-only. What if we kind of combine the two into like a combo plan? All right, fair enough. So now, assuming the same portfolio is yielding 4%, now we're going to peel off the interest and draw down that principal so that in 20 years, we've actually depleted the portfolio again, okay? Now what we're going to be enjoying is just over $70,000 a year of income, okay? Again, making a gross assumption here that we're getting a flat 4%, a net 4% return every year from 65 to 85. Okay, so we got 50,000 in the spend down, 40,000 in the interest only, just over 70,000 in the combo of actually spending down a working portfolio. All right, now you're wondering, okay, I got to spend down, but I got inflation in there, so I'm thinking about that. What else? Well, one of the certainties we've already talked quite a bit about in our first two episodes was Uncle Sam, right? He's just always there, never leaves us alone. So remember, like I talked about in the Roth option episode, you might see $1 million on a statement, but not all statements are created equal in the eyes of the IRS, right? So if we have $1 million in a Roth IRA statement, remember that can build us tax-free income in retirement. As long as we're over 59 and a half, the account's been there over 5 years, we can actually spend down that portfolio just like I explained a moment ago with no tax impact. Now let's take that $1 million. It's no longer in a Roth IRA. It's in a joint brokerage account, a non-qualified brokerage account. Now all of a sudden, Uncle Sam is coming to talk to us, right? So now if we start to take that same approach of interest only, identical portfolio getting us 4% a year, but now we got to pay tax on that interest every year. All right, and just kind of a quick footnote here for these examples, we're going to assume a 30% effective tax rate. All right, just for argument's sake, a 30% effective tax rate for state and federal purposes. All right, so we're getting 4%, non-qualified account. That's going to give us a net of $28,000 a year after taxes. Then you say, well, I'm going to actually enjoy the money. I'm not trying to leave this for the next person or whatever. I'm going to spend it on down and do that combo approach, interest and principal. What's going to happen now is if we did that same linear pay down, we're going to start in year one with an income of $59,000 in change over that from that portfolio. And over the 20 years, it's going to steadily increase till in our 20th year, we're going to receive about $70,000 off of that portfolio. Because now at that point, most of what you're receiving is just a return of your basis, which would of course be tax-free. And that's why it went from $59,000 up to $70,000. All right, we're pulling off the same amount of money, folks, but the tax impact is getting less and less as we enjoy more of our basis. So that's what's going to happen in a non-qualified space. Now we take that same million and we introduce a traditional IRA, okay, or your 401k or your 403b, what is going to be considered a pre-tax asset. Okay, so you got your deductions all the way back in the accumulation phase, but now we're facing income tax on every penny that comes out of there. All right, same exact portfolio. We're getting hit with 4%, or we're getting a yield of 4%. We pay income taxes, interest only. That means we net $28,000 a year again. But now if we want to do the linear spend down of interest and our principal, again, we're being taxed on every dollar as ordinary income at that 30% effective rate. And now we're getting about $39,000 a year every year of retirement. So the point that I'm trying to make here, and if any of that math was incorrect, I take full responsibility, but I'm pretty sure we dotted all our I's, crossed all our T's there. What I'm trying to underscore here is we had $1 million in 3 different statements, but because they were different accounts, our actual take-home pay or take-home money from that account was vastly different in each situation. Okay, so now we've talked about inflation, we've talked about taxes. Now we've got to address one more big elephant in the room, and that's the markets. Okay, maybe the biggest risk we got to think about as we enter retirement. Okay, so one of the quotes I love, John Pierpont, excuse me, that's a tough one. John Pierpont Morgan. Okay, think of those initials there, John Pierpont Morgan. This isn't the trivia question, but J.P. Morgan. Okay, a financial guru of his time. He was once asked, "What do you expect the stock market to do?" And he famously responded, "It will fluctuate." Right, one of the greatest minds of finance in all of history asked, "What's the stock market going to do?" It will fluctuate. That was his answer. Now, these fluctuations in retirement can either wreak havoc on your nest egg, or they could maybe buoy your funds into giving you that golden retirement that you dreamed of. And that really introduces a concept we refer to in finance as the sequence of returns. And what this is explaining is that Mr. and Mrs. Retiree could enter retirement, all right, with an identical portfolio. But if Mr. Retiree experiences some bear markets in the beginning of his decumulation phase, whereas Mrs. Retiree experiences some bull markets or up markets at the beginning of her decumulation phase, Mr. Retiree's money is going to run out way sooner than Mrs. Retiree's money. And the reason for that is, again, as he's drawing out his money and the markets are battering down his portfolio, all those withdrawals now at a loss, they're not receiving the opportunity to rebound. Whereas Mrs. Retiree is watching much more of her portfolio stay in existence and continue to receive growth. And that's where the sequence of returns has such a huge impact when you actually start to use your money. All right, that leads to an example I love, sharing with a lot of my clients, that if we have an investor that has $1 million, and in the first year of retirement, they lose, and let's assume that they're not drawing on their money yet, but they got $1 million portfolio. They lose 50% in year one. What do they have? They got 500 grand. They lost half of it. Year two, they gained 50%. All right, not bad. We had a real big rebound there. If we just look at that portfolio, okay, as an investor on the outside looking in, we'd say, okay, it has a average annual return over those 2 years of 0% year over year, right? But now we look at that gentleman or that woman's actual portfolio, and she says, yeah, I've averaged 0% on the portfolio, but there's $250,000 missing from my account. All right, down 50% in the first year, up 50% in the second year. We're down 250 grand. If you're a little confused, I'll let you work the math on that one. But it's really eye-opening, and I think it goes to show you how fragile an investment could be when you're actually drawing on it. And that a lot of those averages that sometimes we read can be a little bit misleading because it's all referring to a certain point in time, okay, which isn't necessarily our point in time, depending on how we're using, either adding or subtracting from that money. So big things to think about here, folks. Is $1 million going to last? Is it going to be enough? I just introduced 3 common variables: inflation, taxes, and market risk. And those are just 3. And they can have huge, huge effects on the way that you actually enjoy that money when we retire. All right. And one of the things that you're going to, realize if you haven't already, in each one of these variables that I mentioned, you heard the word assume quite a bit. All right. As time goes on, as we draw out the length of retirement, which is kind of the trend today, at least in America, it's only going to exaggerate all these different variables and the impact that they may have. Okay. So, is $1 million going to last? Like I said at the outset, I don't know, guys. I'm sorry to kind of be the bearer of no news, but I don't know. All I can do is kind of paint the picture. And then it's going to come down to you and your loved ones personally. I've got clients that they view retirement as that opportunity to go to the park, throw down the blanket, have a picnic each afternoon, and enjoy a PB&J. And to them, that's their utopia. I got other clients I talk to, and they're already planning cruises around the Mediterranean, safaris in South Africa, and a slew of other things that they've had on the bucket list. All right. Obviously, those 2 retirements are going to come with a very different price tag. Okay. And the $1 million may last or may not last, depending on which of those you choose. I think that goes without saying. All right. And on top of all these assumptions, which we're not even really getting into lifestyle, we have to think about, there's housing costs, there's food, there's insurance, there's transportation, there's those vacations I mentioned, there's legacy goals. Do we want to have anything at the end of the day? All right. There's our dependents. Are we having to care for someone? The location. You want to retire in my home state of New Jersey. It's going to be a little bit different than if you decide to retire, in Wisconsin. Okay. It's just a different cost of living. And then are there going to be other sources of income? Are you pursuing an encore career? Are you going to work part-time? Maybe you have a pension that can, immediately substitute that $50,000 of interest we talked about 10 minutes ago. Maybe Social Security, the way you've planned for that's adequate to cover a lot of your expenses. Do you have long-term care? How long are you going to live? All right, so many variables out there, folks. Going back to the football analogy, imagine if, you're a team that's prepared all training camp, and then day one you walk out to the coin toss and the referee says, all right, guys, you know what? We're just going to play a quick quarter today. That's it. And then the next week you walk out there, you got a different referee, and he says, you know what? We want to spice up the viewers and the fans. We're going to be playing into triple overtime. Right? The way that you would prepare for those games would just be totally different. We're just using the game of a silly little football game, that kind of analogy. Now retirement, again, that horizon, is it going to be for 1 year? Is it going to be for another 35 years? We don't know. So there's so many factors in here. But again, what you can do as an individual as you seek, proper financial and tax help, et cetera, and legal help, going and creating your own retirement and estate planning arrangements, doing the right things, planning way in advance, that can certainly help increase the probability of success, so that when we do enter those golden years, we have choices to make. And that's what I've preached about so much already, is having control over your finances. Okay, so I think proactive planning can certainly help out with that. And then once we get there, it's going to be simple math. How much is coming in? How much is going out? Can we toggle those figures? At that point in time, there's probably not a whole lot we can do with how much is coming in. But as any retiree, we can control probably most of those expenses. Okay, what's going out? So I hope that this has been helpful, just at least giving you a landscape of will $1 million last in retirement. Unfortunately, we didn't give you an answer. That's the big surprise. But I do have one more surprise for you, and that's our trivia question. All right, so sticking with this theme in mind, who was the original host of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Okay, again, another tongue twister for me. Who was the original host of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? If you got the answer real quick, just send that right over to thekadernapodcast@gmail.com. And Sunday night, you might hear your name called for winning the free $10 Amazon gift card. Thanks again for tuning in. This is your host, Brian Kaderna. You've just listened to the Kaderna Podcast. Give us a like on Facebook. Share us everywhere you can. Subscribe to our show on whatever podcast site you're on. And we hope to see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.
The Kaderna Podcast is for informational purposes only. Individual situations may vary, and the information should be relied upon only when coordinated with individual professional advice. Brian Kaderna does not provide tax or legal advice. Listeners should contact their own tax or legal advisors in this matter. All investments and investment strategies contain risk and may lose value. Brian Kaderna is a registered representative and financial advisor of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, PAS, 300 Broadacres Drive, Suite 175, Bloomfield, New Jersey, 07003. Securities products and services and advisory services are offered through PAS, the registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, 973-244-4420. Financial representative of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. PAS is an indirect wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Kaderna Financial Team and International Planning Alliance, LLC are not affiliates or subsidiaries of PAS or Guardian. Kaderna Financial Team is a division of International Planning Alliance, LLC, a general agency of the Guardian. PAS is a member of FINRA SIPC, California Insurance License Number OK04194.